everyone, and welcome to another virtual wine tasting hosted by WineClick. Well, I hope everyone had a great time enjoying the relaxed restrictions since last week. A lot of drinking, enough to quench our thirst, but still have enough energy to join us for tonight's session. So let's continue that atmosphere with tonight's virtual wine tasting and discovering the wines from Dal Forno Romano Winery. WineClick has represented Dal Forno Romano wines for 5 to 6 years now. And this special relationship was created through Marco Pinna, the brand ambassador of Dal Forno Romano Winery. He knew Romano for several years, and when he was tasked by Romano to develop the Asian market, Singapore, to come up with to reach out to Asia, to Singaporeans better. So we were given that opportunity for exclusive distributorship. And since then, it's just been a great experience discovering this winery with Marco. We wanted to host the winery with Dal Forno, but unfortunately, the connectivity at Dal Forno is really, really bad. So because of that, we've got Marco Pinna with us. Without further ado, Marco, can I welcome you to speak to us? And let's start discovering the wines together. Marco, please.
Okay, thank you everybody to join this webinar. Unfortunately for me, I'm not in Singapore. I would like to stay in Singapore instead. But I love your country, Alice, and before the COVID, I spent minimum 1 time a year in Singapore, and educating and tasting wines, new vintages, presenting new vintages. I'm very honored to represent this iconic producer, Romano Dal Forno, and I wanted to try to let you know how the Romano start because it was very curious way. It started when we was very young, and he didn't study enologist, he didn't study agriculture. His father was a farmer and grew up in a farmer house, and his father owned a few hectares. And when he started, he was just married, like 20 years old, and he went to Verona to do an exam to become bus driver. But when after the test, he must wait like 6 months before to have answer. But no, just married, a baby son, and then they need money, and then asked his wife, what we do now? And then I tried to produce some wine, for the one we produce now in simple way, but he didn't have any money, so he went to literally knocking to the restaurant doors, asking empty bottle, clean up and refill, and then start to sell. But was a success, and then when we received after 6 months the positive answer for the bus driver, he decided to remain, of course, thanks, in this business. And then when is very funny but important way to start. And since he started, was a really ambitious person, and then they tried to produce the best Amarone and the best Valpolicella ever. For this reason, at the beginning, he traveled a lot, in particular in Burgundy and in Bordeaux, to see how the producer manage the vineyards, how they are so famous, how they can produce so prestigious products. And for this reason, he introduced a lot of innovation in this winemaking production, in particular in the vineyards. If you come to visit us, we can understand which kind of innovation, because in where we are, the traditional way of cultivation is called pergola veronese, which is basically like a tree, and with a low yield, low density of plant per hectare, 2,000 plants. Instead, we change the way planting the 12,000 plants per hectare. So it was a revolution when we start. If Emerson go to the beginning of the presentation, I'll let you know where we are, where the region is, because Amarone della Valpolicella means that these products come from a specific area called Valpolicella. We are in the northern east part of Italy, in a region called Veneto, famous for the cities like Venice and Verona as well. Verona is the center of Valpolicella. Valpolicella is as a Latin root word, means valley with a lot of cellar. So it means that also in the old Roman period, in this region, there was the wine production. There are a lot of valley from the west side, which is close to the Garden Lake, to the east side where we are, and in the west side we have also classic area. So if you look at some borders, when you see Classico, means the Amarone comes from the western part of the Valpolicella area. And we are in a valley called Valle di Illasi, and which is one of the eastern valley of Valpolicella. We are in an area called Valpolicella Orientale, so eastern Valpolicella. And the vineyards are on top of this valley, which is you can change Amazon, which is the 270 meters above sea level, and some vineyards are in the hills surrounding the valley. Yeah, this is like short history about the Amarone. The name Amarone is a story and legend. Start in 1946 when this enologist Lucchese from a cooperative in Negra, which is
this is us talking,
and tasting a barrel of Recioto, because Recioto is the oldest wine produced in this area. Is the production of Recioto is dating like first century after Christ, and Recioto is a sweet wine. And tasting this Recioto said, "Oh, but this is not sweet. This is amaro. Amaro is bitter." And then was coined the word Amarone. And the first bottle labeled as Amarone appeared in 1939, and after the Second World War started the regular production of the Amarone. But Amarone became a DOC in 1990, and on the 2009, Amarone and Recioto were promoted to the status of DOCG. So, for instance, today we have two wines, two different vintages of Amarone, 2006, and in the label there's a DOC, and 2015, and they label it the DOCG. So the same appellation. The only thing from 2009 changed the appellation in DOC to DOCG, which is guaranteed. G is guaranteed. In this picture, we have represented where we are and the vineyards. The winery is located in number 4, and around the winery we have some vineyards. And the number 3, number 4, number 6, number 7 are in the valley. In the center of the picture, you can see the river bed. Actually, all the valley has just 1 meter of soil, and the rest is gravel. Number 1, number 2, and number 8, and number 5 are our vineyards in the hills surround the valley. So number 2 is Vigna Serena, number 1 is Vigneto Figarolo, very interesting for us. And then number 8 is was just bought from the Mr. Romano Dal Forno in 2017. And totally now we manage 36 hectares. If you calculate that we produce in the good vintage in terms of quantity around from 60 to 70,000 bottles, you can easily calculate how many bottles we produce per any hectare. So the production is between 2,000 and 3,000 bottles per hectare. Yeah, this is some vineyards. This picture is Vigneto Figarolo. It's like an amphitheater, and you can see in the winery is located in the high part of the picture, and you can see also the density of plant. So we have a 1 meter between the rows, and like a 50 centimeters between the vines. This is also Vigna Serena. Again, this vineyard is not far away. Vigneto Figarolo, the hill, the altitude is around 380, from 360 to 380. It's not much higher than the valley, because the valley is 270. But the soil is much more rich and deep in the hills. There's a story regarding the relationship between Romano Dal Forno and Beppe Quintarelli, and to be honest, Romano Dal Forno never worked for Beppe Quintarelli. They became friends, and when they started, Romano Dal Forno was inspired by Beppe Quintarelli, because at that time it was the only iconic producer in Valpolicella. The producer that changed a lot the tradition. And when he started, he wanted to know Beppe Quintarelli, so he went to him and introduced by himself. But they became friends, and the family they are still friends. Since he started, so the first vintage was 1983, the philosophy and the way of production was and is completely different compared to it started, as I told you before, with a few hectares, and the few hectares was a part of his father legacy, but without any facilities. So at the beginning, he bottled the bottle from the barrels without technology as we have now, and also the drying process was completely different compared what we do now. Now, after 37 years, Romano, and now his son, which is the next generation, the second generation, and Marco is the CEO of the winery, and is involved in 100% the winery, is a person which is in charge for vineyards, winery, and me and my colleague Lorenzo, which is for domestic market. We work with Marco and to increase the prestigiousness of the brand, and then all together to cover as much market as we can. But the idea of the wine is the same of 37 years ago. So to produce the best Amarone, the best Valpolicella ever. And you can change it, thank you. Okay, this is the winery, and it looks quite big if you compare the numbers of bottles we produce, but this space are necessary because all the wine we produce are made by dry grapes, which means that all the grapes are dry before start the winemaking process. And to do that, we need space because we collect any single grapes we collect in a small plastic box, 5 kilos max, and then the box goes in a pallet, and then the pallet in the drying room. And then we need a space for the aging because we release our wines after 6 years. So it means, and the aging is 2 or 3 years in barrels and 4 or 3 years in bottles before the release. So you can imagine how many space we need for the storage, for the bottle storage, and also for the barrels we use for aging our wines. And consider also, we need a space also to store the back vintages, because every year 10% of our production goes for the back vintage. So to be able to release after years. And for instance, this year we are releasing in special box of 2006 and 2008. This is the picture that represents what I said before regarding the extremely high density planting in vines, 13,000 per hectare. Consider that we need like more than 10 vines plants to produce 1 bottle of Amarone, and around 7 to produce 1 bottle of Valpolicella. Because you consider that there is a low yield, but also during the dry process we lose even 50% of the weight. The variety we use are basically 5, which are Corvina and Corvinone. Actually, we prefer Corvina. The difference between Corvina and Corvinone are different clones, but also because Corvinone means big Corvina. So the berry are bigger compared to Corvina. So we prefer Corvina. And then we have specific native grape varieties, which are Croatina, necessary for the tannins, and Rondinella and Oseletta. Oseletta is very unusual grape variety in Amarone area, in Valpolicella area, but for us it's necessary for the freshness. And also it's the latest variety we harvest. And then we also do massive clone selection. And then we can say that we use our own varieties because we have our own Croatina, own Oseletta. Mr. Romano Dal Forno, during these 37 years, selected the varieties, the best varieties, and then creating and replanting the best for his and our idea of Amarone and Valpolicella. We do, of course, a different harvest with grain harvest, but also we do a specific grain harvest, which is end of August. So we go to we reduce the shape of the cluster, in particular the bottom of the cluster, which is the part that doesn't ripen as the rest, so to have much more concentration. As I said, with Croatina, we start with Croatina, then Corvina, Corvinone, and then Rondinella, and Oseletta, and the last varieties. In this picture, you can see a grape after a drying process. All the harvest is by hand. The whole is put in a small plastic box. We need at least 1 month to harvest 30 hectares. And then we do the harvest during the harvest we engage like 30 people. It's necessary because this kind of harvest need times. any single bunch must be perfect without any defect. So we use small scissors to cut off the berries if the berries are damaged. And then also we do a grape selection even during the drying process. In this picture, Romano is the one of the I think invention. So he invented this system to dry grapes. This is the system, which is basically 3 big fans that move slowly the air, and they invert a rotation every 5 minutes. And then there is also a fan that moves the air from the bottom to the set of the floor. So to avoid to avoid the humidity. And we don't use any. And if you can you please go back to the picture? Okay. So you can do this picture. You can see the pallet rows with the grapes in the drying process. And this 3 big fans move in between the pallet row. No, we don't use any humidifier, but we have the sensors that control the humidity inside the room. And usually the windows are open just to help the wind, when we have the window, to blow inside the rooms. But when the humidity rises up or start to rain, so computer control and then close the window and move faster the fan. Okay, next. We can go to the next. Okay. Okay, this is the winemaking area. It's very modern, really modern, and all the tanks except the fermentation tanks can be used in vacuum. So this is necessary for us, and then we introduce the vacuum. I think it's a very unique system to conserve and preserve the wine to the oxidation. After the dry process, which is depends on the wine, so it's 90 days max for Amarone and 45 days for the Valpolicella, which means 75 days average for Amarone and 25 days average for the Valpolicella. We start to produce Valpolicella by dry grapes in 100% the dry grapes in 2002. So before 2002, our Valpolicella was a mix of fresh and dry grapes. From the vintage 2002, the Valpolicella, our Valpolicella is 100% dry grapes. So basically, in the same way we produce the Amarone. But back to the vacuum system. After the vinification, when we finish the fermentation, so the wines go to these tanks under vacuum. We suck the oxygen from the tank, and for to do this, our tanks are very specific tank. Instead, if we use a normal tanks, there was like should be like an implosion. But our tanks are very specific to avoid this issue, and we refill the space without oxygen with the nitrogen. And all the process is to avoid the oxidation, which is for us important because our wines has a long aging potential and nice freshness. Yeah, this is also, you will use any chemicals, for instance, to clean the tanks, and they are sterilized by the steam. And then you can see there is like a rail system that, and then the computer recognizes the tank and start to clean the tanks in proper way. Sorry. Next, please. Okay, this is a cellar. We have a few of these cellars, and then another innovation was to introduce the barriques, French barriques, instead of the Slavonian cakes, large cakes. Since we start with this size of barrel, and then we start with the French oak by such a period when there was a lot of requests of a new French oak. The quality of the French oak wasn't like now. And so we decided at that time to move to the American oak. We use only French tonnellaries, but talking about the oak, we decided, Romano Dal Forno decided to move to the American oak. And then the quality of the French oak is again top. And then our wines are aging a mix of American and French oaks. Depends on the vintage. For instance, I remember that 2012 was 100% French oak. And the period of aging in oak depends on the vintage. Is it 2 or 3 years? Depends in barrels. And 3 or 4 years in bottles. So the total aging is 6 years before the release. So this year we are releasing the vintage 2015, and we start to count the years from the January after the vintage. So 2015, January 16, release 2012. And the rooms, the cellar are 40 meters underground, and we have 80% of humidity and constantly 13, 14 degrees of Celsius degrees of temperature. Is the natural temperature, and summer, winter, same temperature. Yeah, this is last year vintage. Yeah, we 2 years. Also, 15 is 2 years, and then the vintage we have now is 3 years in barrels. And the barrels are all brand new. So after the aging, we sell the barrels. So we produce only 3 wines: Amarone della Valpolicella Superiore, and Recioto. And all 3 wines are made by dry grapes, and all 3 wines are made from the same grapes varieties: Corvina, Corvinone, Croatina, Rondinello, Oselletto. The percentage of the grapes can change a little bit, because, for instance, we increase the percentage of the Oseletta from the Valpolicella through Amarone and to Recioto, increasing the percentage to balance the opulence of Amarone and the sweetness of Recioto to the freshness given by Oseletta. Any questions or interaction? Tasting is fine for me.
No worries. I think we can go straight to tasting, and then we've got 2006 and 2015.
Okay.
Okay, so 2015 is the current release for this year. And it is a fantastic vintage. I mean, a little bit more on the commercial side, like what Marco had explained. I think since about 3 to 4 years ago, basically every year, Dal Forno will release their current vintage. 2004, there was no Amarone being produced in 13 or 14?
Correct. The latest vintage where we didn't produce Amarone were 2014 and 2007.
Yeah. So today we're tasting the 2006 and the 2015, and we've got a Valpolicella 2015 as well, and a Recioto 2004. Okay. Okay, because we've got 2 MWs with us today. We've got Annette and we've got Ying. Annette has a tasting that she has to run through later, so maybe I would like to catch a little bit of Annette's time before she run off. So Annette, why don't I just go straight to you, and you can make some comments about the wines for us.
Okay, thank you very much, Alison. And apologies, Marco, but I had something in the diary for a commitment earlier, so I have to rush. Well, I have to rush off to host a dinner. But first of all, just an overall comment on the wines, and it's a big congratulations. I'm a huge fan of your wines. Actually, I've spent a lot of time in the Valpolicella region, and I've done a lot of studies on the drying process, etc. And I think a couple of things that you've done really shine through on all the wines to me. I mean, the slightly drier, the shorter drying period means you can get real freshness in your wines. Also, you can make them dry. You can also keep the alcohol in good balance, because too often some of the traditionalists, are leaving too much sugar behind and the alcohol's a bit out of balance. So all of these wines, even the Ricciotto, show an absolute delightful freshness to them. So just going through the wines quickly, the Valpolicella. Out of interest, I'm wondering why you decide not to call it a ripasso. I'm sure this has been discussed, but
actually, we start to produce Valpolicella 100% by dry grapes to don't make any confusion between our Valpolicella and any kind of ripasso, because our Valpolicella actually is an Amarone.
Yeah,
because the one is made by dry grapes, 100% dry grape, which is the request of Amarone. We press the grape after December, so we are we can ask it to ask it for Amarone, also our Valpolicella, and then to produce to Amarone. But the reason we use the name Valpolicella Superiore is because the idea of the Romano Dal Forno was to promote the territory, to promote the area Valpolicella, and so
yeah,
two products opposite, Valpolicella, Dal Forno, and Ripasso. Yeah. I know the right person to speak about Ripasso.
Yeah. No, I mean, but I think the Valpolicella is
and thanks to your like an introduction about the wines, because one of the most important things for us are two. I don't want to simplify too much, but just to give you an idea about our goals, is to produce dry wines, so 0 sugar, and almost 2015 is 0 sugar. It's like almost 1 0 sugar, and then to produce fresh wines. Because the opulence and the smoothness given during the drying process, which is basically glycerin, it is necessary to be balanced by the freshness and the dry and the no sugar content. No, what I mean. But maybe you feel that the wine is smooth, but it's glycerin, it's no sugar.
No, I agree.
Valpolicella Amarone, of course, not Recciotto, but also Recciotto. Maybe after when we taste, I'm asking you guys if you have an idea about the sugar content, because also the Recciotto is really, really well balanced.
Well, I think, the wines really show everything that you've talked about there. So, as I mentioned before, I love the dryness, I love the freshness on them, and I love the fact you can taste the modernness of the winery in there. So there's, they're very pure. They're not oxidative in style, which is lovely. I mean, do you think having the pergola system as well is really interesting in helping to manage alcohol levels with climate change coming? There's a few producers that are going away from trellis and back to pergola because, whereas in the past lots of people were going the other way round, there's a bit of a sort of people going back to pergola because it's easier to manage the canopy and the ripeness of the grapes there. And I think you can tell it really gives a lovely freshness.
I mean, the weather change, there's a global warming, and then the problem we have with this global warming is not just the maturation, but the hailstorm. Because the hailstorm frequently arrive. We are not far away the Alps, the mountains, so and these storms destroy part of the production, and then for this reason, 2007, 2014, we didn't produce Amarone. But the winery like us, that producer like us, that producer that works very hard in vineyards, they control the production, they select the grapes, they reduce the quantity per grape, are able to control even the sugar. And then when we harvest, of course, the wines are mature, and then we do also an extra drying process during the artificial drying process. But if you look at our alcohol contents are quite the same in the last 15 years. So I'm very sure that working in vineyard, reducing the yield, controlling the production, help to also to avoid high alcohol content, especially talking about the area of Italy, but which is well known, which is Langhe. In that area, the producer is the same problem. The producer that don't reduce the yield, high alcohol. If you work very well in the vineyard, you can maintain a freshness, you can maintain the alcohol. Of course, our alcohol doesn't depend on the global warming. It depends because we dry the grapes and we don't want to have any reduced sugar. But if we produce a wine by fresh grapes, or even the alcohol of Amarone could be like 14, not much, no more. The alcohol increases because they're dry process.
Yeah, the alcohol for the Valpolicella is 15, 2015. 15
yeah,
is safe.
I mean, it's a 14.5 and 15. This is the alcohol. And the Amarone is 17 or 16.
Amarone 2015 is 16.5, and then Amarone 2006 is 17.
Yeah, as I said, the alcohol is between 14.5 and 15 for Valpolicella and 16.5 and 17. But if you look at the label, you see 17. Maybe you can you could be scary, but when you taste the wine, the alcohol is well integrated. So it also is necessary for this opulence. So wine. So the alcohol is definitely necessary.
Well, I'm going to have to run very soon, but once again, I think the wines, all of them, are showing fantastically, and thank you so much for the opportunity to try them again, the latest release, and to listen and see the lovely pictures. I can't wait to get back to the region, but thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Annette. Yeah. So let's continue the tasting. So basically, I was just sharing that 2015, these samples were sent directly from Dal Forno to us. It is the current release vintage. And every year, the winery, I think about from 2 or 3 years ago, every year the winery will release some library vintages. And this year we're talking about 2008 and 2009, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we are tasting 2015 Valpolicella, right?
So we're tasting the 2015 Valpolicella.
Okay. Yeah. Few words about the vintage 2015. Every year, of course, we do document when Marco Dal Forno said what the vintage was, and the 2015 we start very well. Now means is recognized a great vintage for us. No, we have a great vintage, and then we have a nice spring. But unfortunately, in the end of May, we had like a storm, And this storm destroyed all, and then they arrive in a very delicate, vegetative phase, because in May we have we have just a flower, and then when the hailstorm arrives, they destroy everything. And after the hailstorm, part of the mostly of our plants, like 95%, was by defoliated, and these dropped the production of 50%. Fortunately, the summer was fresh, rain and sun, and then we were able to arrive for the final harvest with a good quality of grape, and the result is a very, very nice product, both for Amarone and Valpolicella. So, as I said before, hailstorm is a very critical weather situation we have.
So we're tasting so we've tasted the Valpolicella 2015. Shall we move on to the Amarone 2015?
Yeah, I mean, let me explain the difference between the two wines, because the vintage is the same for both wines, of course. So when the vintage is a characteristic of both wines, Valpolicella and Amarone, and the differences between the two wines are basically two: age of the vineyards. So of course we use the oldest vineyards for to produce Amarone, and the length of dry process.
Length of what?
Drying process.
Drying process. Okay.
Yeah. So the average length of drying process is 25 days for Valpolicella and 75 days for Amarone. Means that in Amarone we have more concentration for two reasons. One is the oldest vines. So oldest vines where the grapes from Amarone come from. And the second reason is the length of the drying process. So more concentration. And the result is that the output is higher. So 17 versus 15, or 16.5 versus 14.5. But the wine is much more complex, more opulent, no? And what you feel like a sugarness is the glycerin, because in this vintage the sugar content is below 1. So technically when is below 4 is dry. The one is dry, and the Valpolicella, talking about the pairings, it's a wine much easier to pair. Amarone needs more food, stewy meat, or is a wine you can drink alone, just to enjoy the glass of wine.
Correct. And then I think from my comments, I think the Amarone feels to me a lot more opulent, a lot more denser. And comparing the two vintage, the two same wine, same vintage, different vines and a different drying process. Yeah. So maybe I would like to invite Ying. Ying, are you around?
Yes, I am. Let me just start my video.
So yes, Ying, thank you so much. Well, if you can help me out a little bit here to make some comments about the two wines.
No problem.
Thank you.
Good morning, Marco. It's almost afternoon for you, and very nice wines. Just as a little prelude to my comments on the wines themselves, I just wanted to say that Valpolicella is one of my favorite regions in Italy. I've long held out that there are really three. People always talk about Piedmont and Tuscany, Toscano, but there are really three classic regions: Veneto, Toscana, and Piedmont. And in many ways, historically, Veneto is the oldest of those regions, with Venice having been a major trading center. So it's always a pleasure to taste Valpolicella. And it was really interesting to hear the history and the tribute to Quintarelli and the fact that Romano was inspired by Quintarelli, because my first introduction to really great Valpolicella was nearly 40 years ago, tasting some Quintarelli. And there's clearly a lot of very high quality Valpolicella in the market today. I think overall the quality in the region has gone up in leaps and bounds. And also just, I think there's just more awareness of the winemaking, more awareness of the quality of the wines. And the whole story behind Amarone and Recioto is fascinating. I have to say my personal preference, even though there's a modern trend for dry wines, my personal preference is the Recioto, because I think that's truly the classic Valpolicella style, and truly reflects to its fullest extent that air drying process, even though you can get the Amarone from it, and you use it in that appassimento method with your Valpolicella. So thank you very much, because it's great to have had Romano sort of take on the challenge and the mantle of producing something that is qualitatively as brilliant as Quintarelli, but also very different stylistically. I mean, if you do a comparison, it's not fair to compare, but they are two very different styles, if I may say so. Quintarelli is a slightly more traditional style, and Romano brought a more modern approach to it. I don't like this traditional versus modern dichotomy, but it is pretty clear that stylistically they're different, but qualitatively they are peers. It's fascinating to do a comparison of the two producers when one can find the wines and when one can afford them. But it is really great fun. So on these wines themselves, I think it's very clear the amount of care and diligence that the estate has put into this. It shows in the density of the color right from the start, from the Valpolicella right through to the Recioto. You have this incredibly dense color, and then that's followed through by this very dense, concentrated nose, followed through onto the palate, into the finish. The Valpolicella, by design almost, and just by nature of its selection processes, marginally lighter. The Amarone's got a lot more weight, density, and complexity. And the Recioto is, I think, a delight because it's got that one, it's sweet, but it's got this wonderful balance of richness, concentration, sweetness as a backing structure to it. Doesn't make it flabby. It's a delight to drink. If you want to talk about sweet red wines, and this is an unfortified sweet red wine, it holds its own with any other sweet wine in the world, the Recioto, in my view. The Amarone is a very particular style, very unique to the Veneto and Valpolicella region, and it is very beautiful for that reason. And interestingly, Amarone and Recioto, in the context of the local cuisine here in Singapore, is so rich, robust, it actually stands up with some of the very strongly flavored foods in Singapore. And I have actually paired Recioto with Peranakan food and very spicy belacan, and it actually does hold, in fact, complements quite well with some of the Peranakan Nyonya food you get in Singapore. The 15 was remarkable. I mean, I think if you look at the Amarone, that it is a great wine now, but it's still very tight. It's still not showing its full potential. I think it will need another, you could drink it now, but I think to see its full potential will be another 7-8 years, and it will just last for a long, long time. I was very intrigued by the fact that you used, I've always known you used New Oak. And then when I was tasting the 15, before I read the technical sheet, I noted on the nose, very strong American oak. What is interesting is that with 11 years difference. If you jump back to the Recioto, I'm not exactly comparing like to like, but the Recioto, the oak's completely well integrated. You don't notice it quite as much. And with the 2006, that was a very interesting wine because it was very savory. The example we have here was very savory, leathery spice on the nose, slightly sweeter on the palate. And I actually found it in a slightly difficult phase at this point in time, maybe not completely knit together, but the 15 was completely in balance and harmony, but just needs time. And the 2004 Recioto was just a delight, beautiful, everything harmonious and together, and no sign of the winemaking. This was just pure wine, pure joyful wine to drink. Yeah, I guess that's I'm a great fan, as you can see, of these styles of wine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, like having your explanation, the 2015 and gives really a nice density of both the Valpolicella as well as the Amarone. And I think notably from what Marco has mentioned, the difference between the two is in terms of wine making, I think it's the same because they both go through the drying period. Yeah, it's just that the length of the drying process literally intensify that density and concentrates the elements in very much well in the Amarone more than the Valpolicella. But what's very noticeable is that dryness on the palate. Do you think this is something to do with the varietal, something to do with the technique, something to do with what is that caused that so distinctive dryness on the palate?
You mean the Recioto?
No, I picked it up on the Valpolicella and the Amarone as well. That the dryness.
Okay. Wait, the dryness is we research the dryness. We research the dryness because the balance with this dryness is the smoothness given by the glycerin, which is performed during the drying process, and also the wines are the body of the wine. The body of wine is very important for both wine. You can recognize the difference because you are tasting our Valpolicella with our Amarone. But if you compare our Valpolicella with any other Amarone, our Valpolicella still remain dense, still remain, full body wine. This is one of the characteristics of our winery is when we said before that the 2015 is a little bit tired, and then it's 6 years, and then you have 2006, so 9 years older wine. But we produce wine for to have a high potential in aging. We release after 6 years. We know that when we release, the wine is ready, but it's not on the top. But of course, after 6 years, we have to release. It's also necessary now for the business. But and when we release, we are sure the wine is ready. Now it's okay, and we don't produce Amarone ever. We try to produce every year, but when the vintage is not perfect, we don't produce. And the reason also to release the back vintages is also to show how is the potential in aging of our wines. Because even 2016, which is 2006, sorry, which is a 16 years old wine, the color, it looks like a young wine. No, it's a ruby red, still ruby red. It's not like, because technology is a result that of how we work in the vineyards, but also how we work in the winery, in the cellar, because We use also technology like a vacuum system, nitrogen, to avoid the oxidation. So to have a wine that can age longer and longer and longer. This is one of the characteristics of our wines.
Yeah, I think the expression that we have of the 2006 in the bottle, because we're having a little bit of internal discussion over here. The 06, these bottles were sent by the winery. I think the 06 has a little bit of the nose feels a little bit oxidized, or feel a little bit heated. So I'm not too sure whether this is the purest expression of the 2006. I think personally, I've tasted some of the other verticals of the Amarone. You should taste, the wine should taste a lot more fresher than the one that I have in my glass here. But nevertheless, I think we've got 2 bottles that my team have actually done the bottling this morning. So I'm not too sure whether everybody has the same one, but at least the one in my glass, it didn't feel as fresh that I would have expected it for. Yeah, so my apologies over here. Yeah.
So certainly that's my experience here, is that the example of the 6 I have is slightly dusty and leathery in the nose, which is not what I would have expected from the 2006 Amarone. So I did have in the back of my mind whether it might have been the condition of the cork on one hand. The other thing, just to go back to your question, the tannins, and I'll hypothesize and Marco can agree or disagree, is I think part of it is, Covina, which is the principal grape variety, is a relatively tannic grape variety. The drying process will also concentrate those tannins, and then the maturation process in the barrels will accentuate that tannins. Now, to some extent, it will show up as dryness, especially as it ages, but it's important to have that tannic structure, because that's how it balances the alcohol. In a sense, it's not just acid, but also tannins that do give freshness to the wine as well. So while it's in this sort of youthful intermediate stage, you're going to get a sense of that dryness as it's maturing. And once it's fully resolved, it will be more harmonious with the glycerine and the sugar or whatever it is. So that's my hypothesis on why. But I think, by experience, trial and error over the years within the Valpolicella region, they've honed that into a perfect practice. But you have to have patience. That's the thing.
But it is very evident when you're having a tasting of the young vintage.
Yeah.
You could immediately feel that drawing out. Some wines you feel like it salivates and so on, but this is like literally drawing out that dryness, that dry tannins.
It sort of coats your mouth, and but I think that's important for its longevity and the ultimate balance. There will be a lot of wines, less well-made wines, which will have a lot of tannin in their youth, but not enough fruit. What helps with Amarone, Recioto, Valpolicella, and especially this example of Valpolicella, is that appassimento process, which concentrates fruit concentration. And so, although the tannins also get concentrated, it's all in balance. And that goes back to when you pick, getting the right balance in the vineyard as well.
Yeah, it tastes perfect. Okay.
Yeah, very good.
Well, could we just talk a little bit about how do you make a passito?
You mean the Recioto?
Yeah.
Okay, because it's not passito. The passito is when you say passito in Italy.
Yeah, it's a Recioto, yes. How do you make the Recioto?
It's not Recioto. It's a passito is much more versus other region that produce wine by dry grapes, we produce all the wines by dry grapes. So all the wine we produce are in appassimento. The Recioto is made by the same varieties of Valpolicella Amarone. The percentage of these varieties change a little bit, and the drying process is 4 months. So is 1 month more than Valpolicella Amarone. But for us, it's the most difficult wine to produce because we don't use any chemicals like a surface or temperature to stop the fermentation. So the fermentation stops naturally, and for this reason, we produced this wine only special vintages. It's not easy for us to produce this wine. The last vintage, which is also current vintage, is 2004.
2004.
Do you have any glass to 2004?
Yes, we have 2004 in our glass.
I'm sorry about the 2006. I think it's a problem. I'm pretty sure the problem is the bottle problem. Yeah,
it's okay. Any questions? Do we have any questions from anyone?
None so far.
Okay. Well, I think with that, I'd like to round off. I'd like to round off this presentation. And Marco, basically, before we end this presentation, is there anything new that's happening in a winery that you would like to share with us?
What is new for Dal Forno need times. Yeah, of course, there's some specific production. But when I ask Marco when we release, it's like 10 years. So yeah, for sure, we are considering new wines, new wine, but is in process. And the process is a long process.
Yeah, but anyway, we're happy to hear that, from the beginning of our presentations, the winery has purchased a new plot. I think that's one or two of the new, there's one plot that's fairly new in that's purchased in 2017.
Yeah. I mean, because we have more vineyard that we need for two reasons. One is a low yield. The second reason is because of the ice storm. So we have to need more vineyards. And then 2015 and 2016 and 2017 are still vintages with small quantities. And 2018 we return in a normal situation.
That's great to hear, because
2 years.
Yeah, but that's great to hear. So we are getting more and more followers of Dal Forno wines in Singapore. That's great news to us. The 2,000-3,000 bottles that Dal Forno is producing now is easily going to get wiped out by the world.
Thank you. I mean, I'm talking about your part of the world, Asia. When I start, when we start together, the presence of Dal Forno in Asia wasn't like now. We improve, we increase a lot of the presence, the countries and the customers, and then I think it can help the visibility of the brand in the Asian market. And thanks to you guys, and thanks to other customers that help us in this path.
Yeah. So I think we'll continue to do a good job with your support, with your help in the very, very near future. We hope to see you. We hope to see Marco back to invite him to Singapore.
I think the borders are open. Yeah, you can fly to Italy and we can fly to Singapore.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. I hope you had a great tasting. So good night and goodbye.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Ciao.